The verdict of obedience of the Sharia court against a disobedient Muslim wife. It is a love story written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. All characters in this book are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, general journal, or school or university magazines. This is a love story about three Muslim girls who were subjected to gross injustice, severe violence, and abhorrent persecutions by Muslim men, religious leaders, and imams, Sharia court judges, and police officers in the Islamic community and the religion of Islam, and it is hostile, hateful, and abusive teachings against women's rights, which are innumerable. For example, beating of women, child marriage, circumcision of the private parts of Muslim girls, which is known universally as female genital mutilation or FGM, slaying them in honor killings, inequality between males and females in inheritance, testimony in court, marriage, divorce, men's guardianship over women, controlling their lives and destinies as if they are minors, physically handicapped or mentally retarded, and forcing them to wear the ibaya, veil, hijab, niqab, or the humiliating black burqa as if they are frightening ghosts. Muslim men are allowed by the Quran to have sex or rather rape without the need for marriage. Captive women of war, such as wives, daughters, sisters, and even mothers of the defeated enemies who are called unclean infidels. Islam forbids a Muslim woman to become a president of a country or a caliph of an Islamic caliphate state or a boss at work or a judge in court. And she is strictly forbidden to lead men or women in prayer as an imama, even if they are minor children. Moreover, the Prophet Muhammad said the woman is an unclean creature, just like a dog and a donkey, and therefore, as a defiled being, she annuls the man's prayer if she passes in front of him while he is praying. Many Muslim countries prevent women from going to school and work, and they are not permitted to drive cars, bicycles, or motorbikes. They are forbidden to practice any kind of sports such as soccer, basketball, volleyball, and tennis. And they are not allowed to go to gymnastics for physical exercises, beaches or swimming pools, cinemas or theaters, or act as heroines in movies, or actors in the stage and plays, or compete in beauty contests such as Miss World or Miss Universe. They cannot compete in the FIFA Women's World Cup of soccer or football because Islam doesn't allow them to reveal their heads, hairs, faces, hands, shoulders, legs, thighs, and hips, or put short pants like men because each Muslim woman is aura or a naked creature. Moreover, none of the Muslim women and girls is allowed to leave the house without her husband or with a muhram man. The woman is forbidden to marry such as her father or a brother. They are also not allowed to fall in love with men before marriage or to choose their life partners. The stories about three abused Muslim teenage girls, namely Intisar, Firdaus, and Muna. Chapter 90. Travel by night with a black angel and a red genie. The girl escaping from the dungeon and her death penalty does not have a watch to know the time. She preferred not to ask on the Taysir bus about the time for fear of being identified and reported to the police authority. What time means to her anyway? She is in no hurry to eat, meet someone, or go anywhere. She has no money to buy food, no relative or a friend to go to, and no specific place to go and hide. Intisar had become like a clumsy animal driven by instinct to survive. She wished in her heart that she was just a parasite or an insect that no one would pay attention to. She realized a long time ago that an animal has more rights and lives a better life than a human being in her motherland. Birds in, ha- in houses and wild animals in the zoo in her country are treated better than women. The runaway girl waited inside the bus until all but the passengers got off. Then she slipped off her seat without anyone noticing her movements. When she went out, she saw that all the passengers were busy taking their luggage. She had no luggage to collect. In fact, she only has clothes on her body and shoes on her feet. She wears the same small sleeveless shirt and tight short panties that her Coptic friend Suzanne bought her. Half of her sexy big ass, thighs, hips, boobs were visible, but her legs and feet were hidden inside her long boots. Then Intisar lowered her head and walked hastily. In a few minutes, entered a secluded place on a nearby road. When she entered the narrow lane, she found the place quiet and deserted. She walks aimlessly along the narrow corridor. Her mind is starting to function properly now. An idea came to her mind and she decided to put it into action. The fugitive girl decided to get out of town and go into the wilderness and spend the night there. She knows that the wilderness is a dangerous place and she might be attacked by some savage beasts. But she would rather go there at night among the beasts than staying with her townsfolk. Humans pose more danger to her life than wild animals. She had spent a whole night in the cemetery in Khartoum city among the bones of the dead, zombies and ghosts, and no evil had befallen her. Now she decides to be like a female Tarzan without a lion claws or a lioness or a tigress fur on her half-naked body and spend the night among the beasts. The girl escaping from prison and execution is now running as fast as she can. She passes many houses, lanes, and shops. She feels very sad because she has become a stranger even in her city, Gadarif, among her family, relatives, and friends. Intisar has been going for a long time. She walks through the eastern end of her city's main market. She avoided the main streets and crowded places. In those dark and lonely passages, she came across many dogs. The dogs kept barking at her, but she ignored them and continued walking and sometimes running. Some men and teenage boys whistle at her and tease her, and some try to strike a deal for bad sex with her because they thought she was an Abyssinian slut looking for clients, but she ignored them too. Some have mistaken her for an Eritrean refugee girl who fled from her camp near the border, suburbs, or villages, and came to the city and became a prostitute on the streets. Most men in Sudan believe that every young Ethiopian woman and Eritrean girl is a prostitute. As she walked, Intisar reached the largest mosque in her city. The house of Allah reminded her of one of those evil conspirators, the Imam of the Grand Mosque, Maulana Sheikh Marzouk. She felt as if she remembered the Antichrist or a Satan incarnate in human form. He is the authorized Mazun who concluded the two contracts of the two legal Islamic halal marriages, who destroyed the life of her late sister Firdos and her life as well. Therefore, she hastened her steps and moved away from that mosque haunted by the devil where it is key appointed imam is one of the most dangerous members of the gang of the ill-fated Osman Satan al-Tayyib. He is also the evil Islamic religious leader who conspired with her criminal half-brother Umar and conducted two marriages with her and her sister Firdaus with the rejected selfish lover Hassan al-Shaitan al-Hilali and the despicable old man Osman Iblis al-Tayyib, who became her father-in-law and daddy to her Christian immigrant husband Sami. While she was working aimlessly, the Muslim girl who became a jail escapee on the run from death row for apostasy and adultery also passed a large Christian church in her home city of Gadarif. It is a Catholic church. She saw many Muslim men and youths standing and urinating on the wall of its four walls as if they were a dirty public toilet. None of them could dare to pee on the walls of any one of the 1,000 mosques in the city, Gadarif. Her city is known as Mecca city or of Sudan because it has such a big number of mosques while there was only one church. If any man dares to urinate on the walls of any house of Allah, for of the 1,001 mosque he would be slain on the spot, and his blood would be upon his shoulders. This is also one of the other killings the law wouldn't punish its killer. At first, the Christian bride sort of entering the church and begging the priest or whoever was there to shelter her, feed her, and hide her from the police. Despite her miserable situation, she once again remembered the good and loving Coptic Samaritans who distanced themselves from her as soon as she was arrested at Khartoum International Airport and thrown behind bars, accusing her of apostasy from Islam and conversion to Christianity. If those Coptic Christians who love her so much and did so many good things for her couldn't help her, how can she expect those Catholics who don't know her to help her hide from the law? Even her Muslim mother Sarah or her best friend Salah Hamuna would not risk their lives and hide an apostate Muslim girl who is on the run from the death sentence, and every policeman in the country is looking for her. However, as she strolled aimlessly around the main market at the outskirts of her town, Intisar began to hear the voice of a lorry's assistant shouting to the commuters over and over, "The refugee camp at Watkauli, we will leave in 10 minutes." Whereof refugee immediately reminded her of her crime of falsifying the identity of an Eritrean refugee girl. Although it is considered a major crime, and because of that, she was detained at the only international airport in Sudan, Intisar still saw a glimmer of hope in her current helpless situation. So she stopped walking toward the wilderness and turned her face toward the harlot. She saw a young man in dirty clothes, which indicated that he was the assistant. She also saw several Eritrean refugees sitting on top of sacks of grain that filled the truck to the brim. They are men, women, and children. They reminded her of the truck in which she escaped with Salah, disguised as a handsome young man. So she goes straight to the truck and decided to use it to get safely out of town into the wilderness for her first night of freedom with the beasts. When Intisar got to eat, she put her right foot on one of the truck tires and was about to climb up. Her attempt is intercepted by a man wearing dark glasses and dirty clothes. "Wait a minute, my pretty lady," said the man, smiling. "Upstairs is not a safe place for a teenage girl like you. We have special seats for beautiful young ladies your age. Come with me, I will show you where you can ride and travel with us in the lorry safely. The beautiful teenage fugitive from Islamic justice accepted his advice and followed him. He took her around the lorry until they reached the front and showed her the reserved seats. She found that there are actually two Eritrean refugee girls sitting in the front seats near the driver's seat. Then the new Eritrean girl thanked the man and went up and sat quietly. An hour has passed since Intisar got on the lorry, and its assistants is still yelling at the passengers, telling them to hurry because the truck will be leaving in 10 minutes. She became concerned that the boy might have mistaken 10 hours for 10 minutes. Every 5 or 10 minutes, she sees 2 or 3 riders have boarded. She wondered how these poor refugees were stuffed on top of those sacks of grain like sardines in cans. Once she saw them before she got on the lorry, they appeared to her as stuffed eggs in a cardboard box. After a long wait, Intisar guessed that 3 hours later, she saw the same man who advised her to sit in the front came and sat in the driver's seat next to hers. He made some adjustment to his seat and mirrors and removed his dark glasses. The fleeing girl glanced at his face. She saw that his eyes were ridiculously small and red. His teeth are large and yellow. He is very tall and skinny. He has no meat on his body, as if he does not eat. His color is as dark as charcoal, which made Intisar think that he painted his body with black paint. She became anxious sitting near such an ugly person. She understands that he's the driver. She also worries about what he might do to her when he finds out she's traveling without a ticket. Intisar tells herself that if he kicks her out of his truck, she will follow her earlier plan, go into the wilderness and spend the first night of her temporary freedom with wolves and hyenas. Then the driver started his engine and the tires of the truck began to move slowly. From her front seat, she can see many Eritrean refugee passengers running and climbing on sacks of simsim seeds and grains of the fatarita, which her city gathers for planting, harvesting, and exporting to all other cities and villages. She has also seen the conductor runs by the truck and repeat his Islamic religious incantation, which is like the Hindu mantra. The lorry will leave in 10 minutes. Intisar was puzzled by the assistant's logic. The lorry now started to move and still he said it would be gone in 10 minutes. The truck left the pickup trucks stations and entered a busy street. She could see hundreds of people busy buying and selling groceries. She's afraid that someone from her neighborhood, Hayel Medan, or a classmate from her high school for girls will spot her while she's sitting near the driver and report her escape to the police and where she can be found and arrested. To avoid being identified and rearrested, the escape girl put her hands over her mouth, hid her face, and pretended to cover her nose from dust. The truck passed many familiar places that she knew from her past. Once she reached her old girls' high school, Intisar started shedding hot tears. She remembered her school days when she used to walk with her younger sister Firdos to their school. In those days, she was not aware of the dark, tragic future that awaited her. Little did she know that one day she would commit the unforgivable sin of eating the forbidden apple fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and falling in love with a rich son. That very sin deprived her of her sister, her brother, and her freedom. Intisar wished again that she had not met Sami in one of the cinemas in their city on that fateful evening and they fell in love at first sight. At least if this love affair did not happen, her sister Firdos and her brother Osman would still be alive to this day. She would not have suffered much and was hated by everyone, including her late sister, who described her in her fairies, a last love letter to her beloved Salah, as the selfish girl who caused her kidnapping, rape, and brutal killing. Intisar begins lamenting her misfortune that led her to defy the entire community. She challenged the rich, powerful, and influential man in her city, Mr. Osman al-Tayyib. What a naive person and foolish girl she is, she thought to herself. She expected that her strong love for her lover Sami would take her wherever she wanted to go and destroy any force that stood in the way of them being husband and wife. But what a pity, her strong love destroyed her family instead. Her irrational love made her a sex slave to a selfish Muslim husband, a Muslim wife fleeing from the verdict of obedience, an apostate woman, an impure infidel Christian, a fake girl, a blasphemer, and a murderous Christian wife. She remembered that in those days, many of her relatives, neighbors, classmates, and other girlfriends tried to prevent her from pursuing her love affair with the rich man's son, but she rejected all their advice and warnings and dug her own grave. Some of her classmates said that Intisar foolishly digs her own grave by falling in love with a rich boy. Some of her girlfriends said that her vanity with her incomparable beauty made her like a butterfly that jumped into the fire, believing that the glowing flame would increase her beauty. Her Muslim mother Sarah told her one day, "My daughter Intisar, you are nothing in front of a great, strong, and influential man in society like Sayyid Osman al-Tayyib." Then the girl, escaping from the gallows, changed her mind and began to ask herself why she had gone to the Wetkauli refugee camp. She had never heard of this camp in her entire life. She could not answer the question of the female police investigators when they asked her what is the name of the camp from which the police permission papers that allowed you to leave were issued. Now she had decided to go to a refugee camp. But what is she going to do in that place? Will the camp police recognize her as a girl escaping from prison and from the gallows? Would they believe her if she claimed to be an Eritrean refugee girl? And if they believe her, will they discover later that she lied again and claimed Eritrean citizenship and then send her back to prison? Intisar was unable to answer any of her questions. She is just going for the sake of going. She wants to be as far away as possible from that dark and horrifying grave cell in which she has been buried alive for over a month. In less than an hour, the truck left the city and turned into the gravel highway. Intisar started to feel her body started to shiver as she was about to fall on either the driver or the other Eritrean girl sitting near her. She gripped her seat tightly to maintain her balance. The truck has now left the city's smooth street and entered the rough highway. It is a very bumpy gravel road, so the tires kick up dust and cover both the inside and outside of the truck in a hurricane of thick dust cloud. Intisar and the two other Eritrean girls started coughing violently. They inhaled a large amount of dust. The driver smiled at them and reassured them by saying that in a few minutes your lungs will take the dust and you will be fine. Then the driver lit a cigarette and let it dangle while smoke spread around his blackened face. His face was dust and sweat. Dirt descended from his right ear and the bridge of his nose. The three Eritrean girls coughed harder as the driver lit his cigarette, filling the dusty air with smoke boiling into the sky. Intisar wondered why neither driver nor his conductor asked her to pay her fare. Is the trip to the refugee camp free? She asked herself silently. She became relieved when she thought of such a possibility. Intisar saw that the UN office would pay for them when they got there. The miserable faces of the refugees who slumped up like sheep over sacks of crop grain confirmed her findings. An hour passed in the lorry and no one claimed the fare. She concluded that the perilous free. Her conclusion proved wrong when she saw the assistant's small head dangling from the right-hand window and knocking with a coin demanding the three female riders pay the fare. Intisar wondered how he managed to keep his head in such an inverted position. He appeared to her as if his legs were tied to a rope on top of the truck, and his head and body hung freely like a chicken on a rope. She imagined how damaging his fall would be if that invisible rope was cut. He also looks like Jack in the box of Genie in Aladdin's magic lamp. Red Genie cried for the said dove, "It is time to pay for your flight." We charged the rate of 2 passengers for each front seat. The heart of the broke girl started to beat fast and loudly, and her body was waiting. Then she looked through the dirty windshield of the dusty truck. She can hardly see anything outside. On either side of the truck, she could see the pitch black, moonless night spread out like fearsome black beast. While wondering what to do, she saw the 2 Eritrean girls bid their fares for the little genie's head. "Hurry up," said Little Dove. "My legs won't hold me anymore. Please, sir, allow me to pay the fare when we reach the refugee camp at Watkauli." "We don't accept that. We charge our prices on this end, not the other. When we get you back from camp, you can pay us there." "I don't carry cash with me. I lost all my money. My money and bags were stolen at the Khartoum bus station in Gadar City." When the vegetative girl clarified a desperate situation, crying, she heard the mouth of the red genie's little head burst into a demonic laughter like an ifrit, and he followed it up with a loud whistle with his yellow tongue, lips, and teeth. His whistle caused the truck driver to stop abruptly, as if it had been in an accident. Intisar and the 2 Eritrean girls with her were almost run out of the windshield. "What is wrong with you, Red Genie?" the black driver shouted angrily after slamming his foot violently on the brake. The little genie's head that had now disappeared from view right out. "We have a passenger without cash. Throw him out of the lorry and let us continue our nocturnal journey. She's a little pigeon, and I don't think she can go home alone on this dark night. We have to get her back to town." "Bring her back to town? You must be kidding. Who will pay for the gas? It will take 2 hours of driving back and forth. Ginny, find the money inside her bag and clothes." Sometimes an Eritrean girl hides her money inside her bra or her panties. Don't hesitate, or a Ginny, to stick your hand into her private parts, inside her bra, between her breast, or even under the swimsuit in her pussy. if she is willingly refuses to give you the money hidden there. I know that these refugee women do not pay money easily. They just want to eat and drink and stay in our country and fuck us freely. She has no luggage and I can't look for money in her underwear and bra. Do it yourself. She might hit me in the face by her hand or a shoe if I put my hand on her breast and inside her pussy. Then the angry black driver pushed his door open, jumped out of his seat and screamed, "Who is she? Where is she? She's not sitting on top of the grills. She's there in the front seat next to you." The now penniless runaway girl sweats and trembles like a reed. Intisar saw the angry driver would go through her tiny bikini underwear and red para, and when he couldn't find the money, would throw her out of his truck. The skinny black driver got up again and looked at the refugee girls. "Three young ladies, who's among you travel free?" "It was me, my kind sir," said the penniless passenger, weeping. "I will pay my fare as soon as we get to the camp. I'm going there to look for bed work." "Oh, young woman, beautiful dove. Every day refugees flee their camps and come to the city in search of work. No one has the money to give you bed work available there. The camp is just a cemetery to eat, sleep, urinate, defecate, and die. I know, sir, I can find something that helps me earn some money. Please don't kick me out of your truck on this dark, wild, scary night. Wolves and hyenas will eat me alive. Here, too, there are snakes, lizards, frogs, scorpions, and other poisonous insects. They can be demons, goblins, ghosts, zombies, and scary beasts. Oh, my sweet girl, I can't throw you out of my truck. I have a heart and a conscience too. But you should have told me that in town before you got in the truck, in which case I would have persuaded you to stay in the city and live among healthy people. Now you will live among sick refugees who fight for their survival every minute they spend in these concentration camps in that scrappy jungle. The emergency would probably come for Eritrean refugees would be more dangerous for you than walking at night alone among these poisonous insects, ghosts, goblins, scary zombies, and ferocious beasts and monsters, as you mentioned. Thank you very much, good sir, for your generosity and kindness. Then the black driver shouted to his assistant, "Red Jinni, I will pay out of my own pocket for the journey of this beautiful young pigeon. But if any other fucking Eritrean refugee tries to deceive you, expel him or her from the lorry without asking for my permission. Do not even care if the teenage Eritrean refugee girl tells you while she's crying that she is afraid of being attacked by a lion and a lioness together while she is alive, or be fucked in her pussy by the devil, or screwed by a zombie in her ass while she is naked." The assistant's voice let out a loud laugh before telling the driver, "The other refugees are all paid their fares in full cash. We have one female passenger traveling free tonight, and you have agreed to pay for her fare." When the red genie's head reassures the black driver of the honesty of the other refugee passengers, the truck resumes its nocturnal journey through the frightening wilderness. The driver was silent for a long time and suddenly said to the broke girl, "You must have been deceived, and I know why. Our Sudanese people deceive you. I know that our people want refugee girls to work for them as servants. They feed them, fuck them, and drive them away without paying them. Am I right, my sweet girl? Although Intisar agreed with his honest words, she remained silent. What is your name, my beautiful princess? Fatima Zahra. The fugitive girl deliberately lied to the driver and hid her real name from him. Fatna bint al-Zahra. How many years did you live in the city? 3 months, sir. And you didn't make any money in those 3 months? They fed you, raped you, and gave you a small hut to sleep in as if you were their dog. They treated you as a free sex slave and domestic servant to do their business. I did not work as a maid in anyone's house here. I stayed the whole time of my stay in the city with my sister and her husband. I quarreled with them because they wanted to send me to work as a maid in a Sudanese house. I know it is not safe for a girl of my age to work in a local family's home. Intisar remembered that their shared Eritrean maid servant Zahra often complained to them that their criminal half-brother Omar had had sex with her several times and did not pay her money, although he promised to pay her and that he loved her and would marry her. But he did not do that until he was arrested as the kidnapper and rapist of the fairest innocent girl, Mona Salahaddin Hashim. He was thrown behind bars and sentenced to 16 years in prison. To tell you the truth, the driver continued his conversation with the beautiful and sexy Eritrean girl Fatima Zahra. I always advise the refugee girls not to leave their camp, Wat Kawli, and go to the city of Gadarif. At least in their emergency refugee camp, they can eat free food and live with their families, and then die and go to heaven. Men cannot easily rape them in the camp, though I know that some local policemen, soldiers of the Sudanese army, and the rabid support forces of Janjaweed rape dozens of refugee girls every day in their camps. Thank you, sir, for your good advice. I have my family members in the camp to protect me from such evil men. Not many refugee girls listen to the good advice I give them. Some young Eritrean refugee women think they are very smart. They believe that intelligence can protect them from rape. And when they fall prey to rape and forcible fucking, they make it their job in the brothels for the rest of their lives, as Abyssinian sluts do. They sell their ties to men and believe that money is everything in life. The fleeing Sudanese girl disguised it as an Eritrean refugee girl did not comment on any of the driver's obscene phrases. She just kept silent. When he realized that she was silent and uninterested in his topic of conversation about sex, he came to his senses and stopped his nonsense talk. He continued driving his truck through the bushes of the scary wilderness and dark night. Intisar began to hear the red genie's head singing some vulgar songs. The other two refugee girls are asleep and snoring with their heads swinging in circles like propellers. Intisar also became tired and soon fell into a deep sleep. She is extremely exhausted and traumatized by the day's changing fateful events. It is supposed to be the last day of her tragic life. Fate snatched her from the gallows and took her to an unknown destination. There is nothing certain in her life. The sudden stop of the truck is followed by the genie's loud announcement of dinner time. His screams and knockings woke up all the passengers from their slumber as if they were as if he were Musahirati beating his drum in the middle of the night of Ramadan. The fleeing girl woke up, jumping in fright, her heart racing. She was in the middle of a horrific nightmare when the truck pulled her out of it. She thanked God when she realized it was one of those terrifying nightmares she used to have every night like sail. Her stomach is aching with controllable hunger pangs. She is starving as if she has been fasting for more than a month of Ramadan. The last food she ate that day was a small sandwich of love and fava beans that the brazen female guards forced into her mouth. She wouldn't have eaten it if it hadn't been forced into her mouth. She knew that they only wanted it to keep her alive so that they could hang her on their gallows and execute her for her so-called abominable religious crimes against Islam. But here, away from the prison and her dark grave, she needs a healthy and sufficient amount of food to quench her hunger pangs. Then she saw the two Eritrean girls coming down from the lorry and going and sitting around a table with two chairs in a small hut for food. The other passengers also sat in chairs and ordered their food. The driver and his assistant also slipped away from the truck and joined the Eritrean refugee passengers. The girl escaping from death now was left alone, sitting in the truck. She wished she had any valuables to sell in order to buy food. She wondered what she could sell for a little money. She knows she cannot sell her sleeveless shirt, short pants, or a camisole and travel the rest of the trip in her bra and underwear. She remembered how the driver tried to get her to talk to him about sex, and she became very frustrated by his vulgar conversation. He would certainly sexually harass her while driving his truck if she sold her shirt and stayed in her bra sitting next to him. He is the type of a man who doesn't hesitate to use the vulgar four-letter word fuck in front of three teenage Eritrean girls sitting close to him. The penniless prison escapee finally decides to sell her boots and continue her journey barefoot to the refugee camp. When she came to such a fateful decision, tears rolled like hot water from her beautiful eyes and ran down her soft cheeks. While she was thinking of going to the food hut to sell her shoes, the girl freeing the death sentence issued against her by the judges of Islamic Court of Justice. Here her real name, Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, mentioned on the truck's radio. It is the BBC Arabic news broadcast. The female broadcaster is talking about her execution and the bloody massacre that took place between the security forces and the crowds of Muslims in the Freedom Square in Khartoum city. The girl free from the death sentence and the girls quickly turned off the radio before any of the passengers or a driver or a assistant returned it and heard the news of her escape and the bloody massacre that occurred because of her, which led to the deaths of thousands of innocent people. She became very frightened when she heard her case had made international news. She concluded that the Sudanese police are searching for her everywhere in the country. Intisar started crying bitterly again. Her abundant tears blinded her beautiful eyes. Her mouth is very dry and thirsty, as if she is in a barren desert without water. Then she saw a small shadow approaching her from afar. The tears prevented her from recognizing the red genie's head, but his funny voice identified its owner before she could see him clearly. "This is for you, pretty dove." Intisar quickly wiped her tears when she saw the little helpless hands holding a cold drink bottle and a large sandwich. Without hesitation, she reached out and took the food from the little boy and smiled at him. "It is a free gift to you from our kind driver." The broke girl said happily that your driver is a black angel and sent to me by God, and you are my lucky, the red genie who came out of Aladdin's magic lamp. Then she closed her mouth and took a big bite of the delicious grilled meat and white loaf sandwich. She swallowed the morsel of that fresh piece and before chewing it properly, followed by another big bite and proceeded to chew it with her sharp teeth and tasted it with her tongue. Fresh food and delicious drinks revived the innocent girl's spirit. A fugitive on death row fell free as a dove for the first time, away from the cursed Sudanese prison and its horrific grave. The escaped prisoner finally smiled happily and thanked God for the free heavenly manna. She prayed to her good Lord Jesus Christ as a short prayer of thanks for her safety and protection and for using the kind driver to pay her fare and buy her dinner. Once all the refugees had returned from the dining hut, the happy, free girl saw Red Genie's little head climbing the lorry through the front left door and occupying the driver's seat beside her. Then she smiled. Then he smiled at her and started the engine. She thought he was preparing the truck for the driver, her black angel. When the truck started rolling its tires, fear filled her heart. Then she saw her red assistant, Ginny, stretch out his little head to see in front of him. The engine began to howl like a hungry wolf in the dark night, and the speed increased steadily, madly, as if the truck had suddenly grown wings and started to fly. Tears kicked up the dust, and Ginny's little head began to sing his favorite vulgar song. I see her, I laugh and laugh, I run away and come back to her. This beautiful dove who's having a sexy body, a man with a bad leg like me, whose dear fled cannot fuck her pussy with his dick. This bad song was considered a degrading song and was banned in Sudan. Any drunk man or a tramp caught singing it will be arrested by the police. Then he will be punished with 55 lashes and 6 months imprisonment with a large fine. Regine sings it to the beautiful and sexy semi-nude Eritrean girl whom he named Little Dove. He is like the black angel. Black angel. The lorry driver fell in love with her at first sight. They both know that the Eritrean chick is is as beautiful and sexy as she cannot love an ugly truck driver like the black dog and Lori's assistant like a red monkey. However, the beautiful and sexy refugee dove falls in love with both of them and considers one of them her black angel and the other her red genie who came out for her from Aladdin's magic lamp and is ready to fulfill her 3 impossible wishes. So his vulgar song was understood by the sweet dove sitting beside him as a flirtation. So his words made her sexually aroused until she wet her black swimsuit-like underwear and wet her booby hair. It was a wonderful experience that made Intisar's heart full of excitement, admiration, and adventure. A feeling of respect and reverence mixed with awe and amazement, inspired by something majestic and powerful. She senses that the funny red genie and the ugly black driver are 2 undercover angels sent from heaven to lift her out of her dark world of deep heart abuse, hatred, and persecution. In the Democratic Republic of Satan and swore on wings of eagles to a wonderful world far, far away that has made her hold her breath in awe. She has never experienced such a wonderful feeling of victory. Her seated soul was suddenly filled with an overwhelming sense of reverence, admiration, fear, awe, and wonder that something too great, sublime, and so powerful produces within her inner being. A sweet little dove, do you like my drive? The genie asked. Yes, I love it, and I love you too, replied the fleeing dove, laughing happily. Hold on to your seat firmly. We shall soon pass through hills and valleys up and down. When will we get to what Kauli refugee camp? After 4 hours, we'll catch the sunrise there. That means, Jinni, there is still a long way to go. If I hadn't been driving this slow lorry, would have done it in over 6 hours. How old are you? The dove asked. I don't know, the genie replied. My parents didn't remember the date of my birth. How can neither your father nor your mother remember your date of birth? Oh, sweet dove. Young lady, I have no parents. Intisar jokingly said, you must have two parents. Otherwise, how were you born into this existence? The sweet dove saw that the red genie of her luck, who sprang out of Aladdin's magical lamp, was just joking with her. In fact, the red genie is like the first man Adam, who had no father, mother, siblings, or human relatives until God created Eve for him from his rib. Jinni in the language of Sudan is what haram, or euphemistically an illegitimate child. His biological mother was a mentally retarded woman who was raped by an evil man. Her name was Asha Suf, which means the woman of thick hair covering her body like a wolf. She gave birth to him in the main market in the city of Gadarif. When he was 3 years old, she died of malnutrition and left him to grow up on his own. He is like wild grass that grows out. There is no such thing as child abuse through child labor, or a child soldier, or a child abuse through sexual exploitation or molestation in the said world. Every child, regardless of his age, may be employed, or any minor girl may be married off without reaching the age of marriage agreed upon legally in all parts of the world by 18 years. This is the legal age for consent to marry, according to the United Nations Human Rights Charter, which was based by the CEDAW, International Convention on Women's Rights, which is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Many of its clauses were rejected by Islamic countries because CEDAW agreement contradicts the teaching of the Holy Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad about women in Islam, which hate and degrade the rights of women, as we saw in the tragic events of this emotional novel about the three innocent girls, Intisar, Firdaus, and Muna. According to the personal status law in Sudan, it is permissible unlawful for a father to marry off his virgin daughter to any man, regardless of his age, when she is 10 years old. Accordingly, the Red Jinni began since the age of 3 to beg and sometimes work. He has never been to school before, and he is illiterate and can neither read nor write. In this way, he somehow survived until he was 13 years and became Lord's assistant. When he grew up, he found that everyone around him called him Waddal Haram because his parents were unknown, and he hated that disgraceful name, which was censored and not praised. So when he was hired a Lord assistant at a bus station at Lord's Dock, he falsely claimed that his mother had named him Ginni at birth and that his father had slaughtered a sheep to name him. His crazy mother, Asha Suf, was red in color because she is from Aleppo, one of the granddaughters of the remnants of the Turkish Arnauts who invaded Sudan under the leadership of Ismail Pasha during the reign of his father Muhammad Ali Pasha of Egypt. Ismail Pasha was traagically killed by the king of the Jahiliya tribe, Al-Maknimir, who burned him alive with his Turkish soldiers, Arnaud. Then the murderous Sudanese king fled like a coward from the Diphtherids' vengeful campaigns and fled to the land of Abyssinians, known today as Cuban state. He left behind the Jahiliya girls and Shagia women who were subjected to gang rape by the Diphtherid soldiers and gave birth to illegitimate children who later claimed that they were indigenous Arabs whose grandfather was Al-Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, and some claim that the messenger of Islam himself was their grandfather. Anyway, Jinni's mother was raped in the dark of the night when she went to urinate and defecate in the public woman's toilet by one of the men in the yard where she was staying with her family and more than 20 families of Turkish and Kurdish Arnauts. The bad guy who attacked her and raped her like a dog rapes its fish is also from the Arnaut, and so she gave birth to her son red in color like the hot of a hot pepper, chili pepper, and for this reason her son was called Jinni the Red. The mother hid her rape from everyone until she found out she was pregnant. This is a harmful habit for Arab and Muslim women. They hide their rape for fear of a sexual scandal, which is usually accompanied by either an honor killing or a wasting the opportunity to marry as a virgin girl. Sorry, she was raped before married. When her father found out that she was pregnant with a fondling, he beat her until she became insane. He refused to believe that she was raped, and so that she bled game with her lover and committed adultery. After that, her elbow family expelled her, and all the Arnauts exonerated themselves from her. This is in short was the story of the birth of the fondling child who became known as Jinni the Red in the city of Gadarif. I'm serious, young beautiful dove. The assistant Jinni resumed his words to Intisar, who was sitting near him while the lorry was driving. I don't know who my parents were. Where were you born, dear Jinni? The sweet dove asked after wiping some tears from her smooth cheeks. The jealous KB who fled from the gallows felt that the story of her red angel Jinni's life was more tragic than her sad love story. I don't know that either. I found myself born in the streets of the main market of Gadarif city. Before she can make any further inquiries into the tragic life of the Wonderland boy, the death raw scapegoat girl's body started bouncing up and down as the truck rocks and speeds instantly. So she grabbed her seat tightly. She now knows that the so-called Wad Haram boy drive the lorry up and down hills and valleys. The rest of the journey, as predicted by the little head of the red Jinni, is very dangerous and difficult. For the rest of the night, all the refugee travelers stayed awake. Early in the morning, the skinny driver, the black angel, swapped seats with the assistant red Jinni, who came out of Aladdin's magic lamp and drove the lorry for another hour. The free-spirited girl who had miraculously escaped from the gallows watched the sunshine on the distant horizon through the tall trees as the driver stopped the truck, announced the passenger that they had arrived safely at what Cowley refugee camp. The Christian bride felt as if she had been brought on a space shuttle from the zodiacal sky and landed on the surface of another planet in a galaxy thousands of light years away from the Milky Way. Chapter 91. The girl escaping from the death penalty arrives at the Watkauli refugee camp. Watkauli camp is the largest refugee camp in Sudan. The camp is located exactly on the border between Sudan and Ethiopia. It is an emergency camp. It has no fencing around it. It has no beginning or end. For those displaced refugees who lived in a refugee camp before, they cannot accept Watkauli as a refugee camp. It is worse than the Al-Hol camp in Iraq, which is full of Muslim female terrorists from Western countries. All these dangerous women terrorists want to go back to their Arabian countries where they have citizenship. Most of the male terrorists who came from Western, African, Asian, and Arab countries were killed by the US-led coalition forces when they defeated and dismantled the Islamic Caliphate of ISIS. Those terrorists who surrendered were tried and sentenced to be hung in Iraq and Syria. Some have been executed, others are on death row. Al-Hol camp is the largest refugee camp in the world. What Kauli is just a place in the jungle in eastern Sudan where UN staff take in Eritrean refugees and provide them with food and little medical care. Refugees walk straight from the Ethiopian territory to the camp. If you go up to the watchtower of the camp and see the refugees coming in their number of tens, 20s, and 50s, you will think that they are like swarms of ants or locusts or grasshoppers emerging from the ground. They are covered in dust, mud, dirt, and sweat. They are dressed in dirty, tattered rags, and their emaciated children are naked and barefoot. They are thirsty and hungry. Their skinny bodies are without flesh, and their emaciated babies walk like skeletons with big heads. They are victims of severe malnutrition. These displaced people have been walking for days. They abandoned their villages and towns and came to Sudan for food, shelter, days, and a decent burial. Those who escaped poverty and famine would be captured by the Ethiopian army or Eritrean rebels. Only the elderly and children will be allowed to continue their dangerous walk into Sudan. Boys and girls who are eligible to take up arms and fight will be forced to join either the Ethiopian army or the Eritrean rebels. The refusal to join either would mean a death sentence upon themselves. Some human smugglers studied the way and discovered escape routes for the youth. Their path is more dangerous than the valley of the shadow of death, which the escaped girl Intisar passes through, while roaming the streets of Khartoum and being held in a cell in Sudan. They have to fight off wild beasts and human thieves known as shifter, and the darkness of the night. At the darkness of the night, they hide under the cover of mountains and trees. Sometimes they bury themselves in the ground so that the Ethiopian military helicopters do not spot and shoot them. Their food will be anything they find from the trees of the forest, animals, and edible insects. Their drinking water will be obtained from a river, muddy, dirty, known as Setit. It is a seasonal river and gets dry most of the time. If the displaced Eritreans are lucky enough to pass through all these dangers and escape death, they will reach what Kauli emergency refugee camp after at least 2 weeks of walking on their bare feet. Human smugglers expect to be paid for their risky services within a month after they bring the youths to the camp. If the Eritrean boys and girls fail to keep their promises to pay for their smuggling, the smugglers will make sure they are not left to live in peace in Sudan. Fearing for their lives, the smuggled girls will be forced to flee the refugee camp and become maid servants in Sudanese homes or go into prostitution to pay off their debts to the gang of people smugglers. Of course, they should have free sex with their smugglers all the way without asking for money for their sexual services. Even in Sudanese homes, Eritrean maids must agree to sex with males if they want to keep their jobs. Very often, Eritrean girls are raped by Sudanese policemen and soldiers inside their refugee camps. And instead of guarding and protecting them inside the camp, these Sudanese security men abuse their authority and rape Eritrean refugee girls and young women. According to the United Nations as a statistical report, more than 1,000 refugees cross the border every day to reach what Kauli camp. The medical report showed that an Eritrean child dies every 5 minutes, and every 10 minutes an adult expires. The survivors would be kept in the camp for 3 months and then transferred to a permanent camp. There they would be officially registered as refugees, but not in Wat Kauli. Accordingly, Camp Wat Kauli can more probably be called a charitable place rather than a refugee camp. Each day, when the refugees arrive at the camp, UN workers will cut down more trees and clear the forest to house them in small tents. They will provide them with water, food, and blankets. The blanket will be used as a mattress and cover, and then it is left to the newcomers to make sure that they do not get bitten by snakes or stung by poisonous scorpions or eaten alive by wild beasts. Many of the refugees have learned from their experience of 14 days in the jungle how to keep wild beasts away from them. From sunrise to sunset, they will cut down trees and burn their wood to drive away those voracious beasts. The burning wood will create choking smoke. Sleepers will cough and sneeze all night. In addition to all these hardships, females will be subjected to sexual harassment by their Eritrean male counterparts. UN staff and workers, Sudanese policemen, and military soldiers, especially the latter types of people who believe that their God-given rights or the law of their host country guarantee them privileges of sexual intercourse with Eritrean refugee young women, whether these girls agree to it or not. These are the dire conditions experienced by Eritrean refugees in Wat Kauli camp when the Christian bride fleeing a death sentence sought refugee and protection for her life inside. At 5:30 a.m., the girl Intisar, who escaped from prison and death, followed the other 2 Eritrean girls until the 3 entered the camp. This is how they got in. First of all, there is a small river called Satit, which separates the camp from the Sudanese village of Wat Kauli. The truck stopped at the village. From there, they walked for a few kilometers until they reached the camp. There is only one temporary bridge connecting the Sudanese village to the refugee camp. This bridge is securely guarded by fully armed Sudanese soldiers. The 2 girls told Intisar that they could not enter the camp by crossing that bridge. The Sudanese soldiers will not allow anyone to enter or leave the bridge unless they obtain official documents from the Sudanese police authority in the camp. These are the police permission papers to leave the camp that the that put the runaway Christian bride Intisar in a serious trouble with the Sudanese police when she falsely claimed at Khartoum International Airport that she was an Eritrean refugee girl. Fortunately, when the escaped prisoner from the gallows made her first visit to Kauli refugee camp, the muddy water of the river Setit wasn't too deep. Despite this, the three girls crossed the water that reached their chests. Somehow they managed to cross the river without drowning their bodies in the murky water and not being swept away by the waves driven by the strong current. When Intisar entered the emergency camp and saw its residents, she could not believe that they were people or living creatures. She felt like she was on the day of judgment, and these refugees were resurrected from their graves to count on the last day for the sins they committed in their past earthly lives. Although a thought arose in her mind and became a strong conviction that she might not be able to survive a single day if she stayed in this infernal shadow of the Valley of Death camp. She had convinced herself that she would be safer in the woods with the wild beasts than she would be in the camp with these humanoid creatures grappling with death every second and every minute. Even the hellish pit of her tomb-like cell and dungeon in the woman's prison in Khartoum city were safer for her than the death camp at Wakauli. So the girl escaping from the death sentence immediately decided to leave the camp and go to the forest and live among the wild beasts. Her determination became stronger and her convictions heightened when her eyes saw the Sudanese soldiers walking around the camp with automatic rifles in their hands. Intisar also spotted several Sudanese policemen walking around with pistols strapped to their waists. She knew and understood that sooner or later the soldiers and policemen would know through the media, on the radio, or see her picture in the local newspapers about her escape from the prison, and she would be rearrested, returned to Khartoum, and executed. That was why she immediately moved her feet and headed toward the boundary line. After only 1 hour's walk, the girl escaping from prison crossed the Sudanese border and entered Asuban territory. She is now outside the Sudanese border and walking on foreign land. Every now and then she comes across the displaced who suffer from hunger. Intisar decided to continue walking aimlessly down the bumpy main road. She walks most of the time and rests for some time under the shade of trees. She wants to find a village or a town where people still live. She walked all day. She walked more than she rested. At sunset, Intisar reached a small village. The village is completely deserted except for some insects, birds, and mice. Now she is very tired and exhausted. She knew she could not move any further. Then she climbed aboard a little hut, called it Rakuba, which is like an old ramshackle hut. And the damsel fleeing death in her own country spent her first night in a strange land. As a 17-year-old girl spent the night alone in a deserted village, anything could happen to her. But Intisar never thought for a moment what would happen to her if she slept alone in such a desolate place. She spent a night alone in the cemetery, alive among the bones of the dead in her home country, with the belief that a zombie would attack her and kill her and bury her with him in his grave. It was as if her sense of fear had died a long time ago, as if loss, pain, hunger, suffering, beatings, torture, abuse, rape, quarrels, convictions, imprisonment, refusal, the double death sentence of stoning and beheading, and insults killed her sense of fear and everything human inside her, taking her into a female animal with two legs. When Intisar woke up in the next morning, her hunger pangs were very strong. She searched the whole village for something to eat, but found nothing. Insects, birds, wild animals, and rats left it nothing to eat. So she left the village and continued her perilous and uncertain journey. After a short trip, she left the road. She left the road and entered the forest in search of something to eat. She found some wild leaves that looked like dates in some trees. Then she took some stones and started throwing them in the trees. Her efforts resulted in some of those dry leaves being dropped. Because of the drought, these trees look like artificial or burnt trees. She sucked some She sucked out some of these dry fruits, stuffed her buckets with some, and continued her perilous and unsafe journey. After many hours of walking, Intisar came across a group of all men and women and their children walking along the road. She begged them for some food and a little water. They are generous enough to give her a few drops of water, but they have no food to offer her. She drank what they gave her and walked her way, and they walked their way. Intisar continued to walk quickly and ran sometimes until the night found her while she was walking. She is very worried when she cannot find a village to sleep in. She is afraid to sleep in the open because she saw some snakes and scorpions crossing the road while walking. That is why Intisar decided to keep walking all night. After a long walk, she saw a fire burning on the road. Without a moment's hesitation, the runaway Sudanese bride walked straight to the fire. When she got to it, she found many Eritrean old people with their little children, all sleeping like lifeless bodies. They crushed in a deep sleep around as if they are the cave people until she saw some of them were dead corpses. She crept quietly and laid her weary body near the fire and quickly went into a deep sleep herself too. She slept through the night like a tree trunk without movements or dreams. The next morning, the scorching heat of the sun on her face causes her to wake up with a severe headache. She opened her eyes and looked around. She saw that the sleeping cave people had also woken up, except for 6 of them. Intisar soon realized that they had died in their sleep at night. She saw some old men and aged women laboriously opening their mouths to weep for their dead. Their eyes do not shed tears because of their dryness. Their bodies were drained of any fluids. They are like walking corpses. None of them bother with the appearance of the strange young girl in their midst. It might not disturb them even if they woke up and found Satan himself joining them in their slumber at night. Their main concern is to fight death and cling to life until they cross the border and reach the land of Sudan. Intisar wondered how they could bury their dead. None of them seemed strong enough to dig a hole an inch deep to bury a single fly. When the sun became hot enough, she saw 2 old men standing up and siding the legs of a dead woman and beginning to drag her. The effort seemed to be too much for the 2 aged men. Intisar went ahead and offered them a hand. She grabbed the emaciated corpse's shoulders and carried it. The 2 old men and the compassionate foreign girl continued dragging the body until they reached the edge of the forest. The 2 old men let go of the the dead old woman's legs and motioned for her to follow to fetch another old man's body. When this corpse was also taken away, Intisar saved them from the labor of carrying the bodies of four emaciated dead children. After this first step of the burial was successfully carried out, the runaway girl began to think about how this old man could dig six graves with her to bury the dead bodies. Her astonishment turned it to shock when she saw the entire group wave their emaciated hands to her and resume their perilous journey towards Sudan. Although they didn't speak to her in their Tikrinja language, they all thought she was an Eritrean girl like them. Intisar wondered how a person could be forced by his desperate situation into such a helpless state of not being able to bury his son and daughter or his earthly father and his old diseased mother. Could a man be compelled by dire necessity to leave the carcasses of his close relatives to the beasts and vultures to feed upon? She baffled and wondered this question for a long time. Meanwhile, her eyes are fixed on the group of miserable displaced Eritreans who were creeping up the bumpy road slowly like turtles. After standing for a long time near the unburied corpses and looking at the slow human reptiles, she offered prayer of mercy upon them. Then she surrendered herself towards her unknown destination and resumed her perilous walk. She continued walking for a few hours before stopping to walk exhaustingly and then entered the forest in search of food. She found her edible tree dry fruits, which are called in her country al-lalob. It is called Indian almond. The racist Arabs call them Tamr al-Abid, which means the days of slaves. They are also called in English balanites and grow on the soft tree. Intisar picked up some stones and threw them on a soft berry tree. The tree dropped the fruits of its dry leaves, the Indian almond. She sucked and ate them while sitting in the shade of the same tree. Luckily, she saw a small, dirty, muddy bottle of water near her. Necessity forced her to kneel like a stray animal and drink from that unhealthy water of the pond. When she quenched her thirst from that dirty water, a strange idea came to her mind. First, Intisar hesitated to apply it, but the temptation is strong enough to make her give in. Yet she looked in all directions to assure herself that she was alone. She even looked up at the sky to see if a god or an angel was looking at her. When she became sure that there was no divine or angelic being or a demon hiding there but herself, the pretty foreign girl slipped out of her short pants and her little sleeveless shirt and took off her tall boots. She stopped again and looked around to assure herself that no one was watching what she was going to do next. Then the sexy girl took off her little black underwear and took off her red bra and stood completely naked in that one spot. She has become a female Tarzan without allowing clothes or allowances fur. She also became like a stripper in a nightclub for sexy teenage dancers. By this time, her black pubic hair had grown long and covered her private parts like a bush. During her long imprisonment in the woman's prison inside the bottomless pit of the kingdom of Tartarus, the imprisoned Christian bride could not find an opportunity to shave her pubic hair or armpit hair. They kept her under lock and key like a wild beast or a dangerous criminal. Even wild beasts in Khartoum Zoo are treated better than female suspects and convicts in the women's prison. The girl escaping from prison completely naked began to feel the scorching African sun burning her soft skin as if it were at a temperature of 45 degrees Celsius or 165 degrees Fahrenheit. It is hotter than the sauna heat in the swimming pool. At first, Intisar washed her clothes in water without soap and let them on some rocks to dry. Then she began to gradually sink her naked body into the warm water of the stagnant pond. She enjoys the wonderful sensation of warm water laving the tunes of her sexy naked body. Then she swam in shallow backwater for more than an hour. Finally, the said innocent girl, Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, who miraculously escaped execution, felt that the waters of the forest had cleansed the filth and purified the two pollutants that defile her pure body in the brothel and tavern of the Bim Lady Mazanafisa and the house of slavery for the cruel wife of the military Major Sanosni, the Islamic legal rape slaughterhouse where she killed her rapist Hassan and the horrific tortures of female guards and healed the scars of beatings by the Muslim female terrorists inside Kobar Central Prison for Women and her suffering in her dark tomb-like cell into which she was thrown. She now has the same wonderful feeling that a devout Hindu young woman might have felt after having cleansed and purified her naked body in the sacred river Ganga Jamna. The Tarzan of the jungle of Africa came out of the holy water of her pond and sat down on a sacred rock to dry her purified body. While sitting, she also hears the sounds and singing of birds chirping in the trees. They are great moments. She closed her beautiful eyes and opened the screen of her imagination. She could now see him from afar as he ran toward her. Minutes later, he reached her and embraced her purified and sanctified naked body. Then he kissed her sweet lips. She completely surrendered to him and felt his hands touch her all over her sexy naked body. Her holy Christian groom first caressed her breast, then fondled her private parts and began making love to her. The unjustly separated lovers continued to enjoy each other's naked bodies for a long time as if they were in a hotel room on their honeymoon. In the meantime, the charming, naked bride Intisar kept embracing her body, kissing her lips, sucking the nipples of her breast, and licking the rest of her private parts. Her imagination was fueled by one of those wonderful nights she spent with her lover at the hotel during their wonderful honeymoon. She did not open her eyes and look around until she completely satiated her body sexually through self-masturbation by inserting her middle two fingers into her hairy pussy, rubbing them in and out quickly and at a steady pace, which made her reach an earth-shattering orgasm. The horribly abused teenage girl's mind and heart are finally freed, and she has achieved her true freedom from the infernal prison of Sudanese woman in which she was buried for so long in the city of Khartoum. This wonderful realization and sex satisfaction made the beautiful and sexy naked Christian holy bride Intisar wonder and yearn to meet her handsome lover and Christian holy groom Sami. Chapter 92. Life outside the borders of the Democratic Republic of Satan. A Sudanese girl who was unjustly sentenced to death and became a miraculous escapee from prison after she satiated her completely sacred and purified holy naked body by masturbating to the strong presence of the image of her handsome lover in her imagination opened her eyes. The holy bride Intisar found herself not in the hotel with her Christian bride Sami, nor in the prison with the dinosaur police inspector Sakina, Satan Allah, but in the valley of the shadow of death in Asubia, inside the forest. She got to her feet and put on her dry clothes and tall boots. Then she emerged from the lake of paradise as the queen of the jungle in African folklore, or a Tarzana in the fur of a leopard, or a lioness in a Hollywood movie. If anyone saw her at that moment, he might have mistaken her for a mermaid from one of the Disney princesses of the fairy Gale Alginia, the bride of the Nile, or the Queen Semiramis, who was born to a fish. As soon as Intisar reached the road, she saw them again. They crawled along the road in their rags and emaciated bodies like a flock of ducking turtles. This time they are marching in great numbers, as if the inhabitants of an entire village or a town had been driven out of their huts by famine and are now migrating together to Sudan. She waved her hand to them, but no one waved to her, nor is anyone dangerous to her. She knows that they are harmless creatures. Their miserable situation has turned them into a new kind of creature. They have become neither people nor animals. They are humanoid in their outward appearance, but in reality they have become like half humans and half animals. They walk their way and she walked her way. This time, after they disappeared from her vision, the girl fleeing from the noose of the gales realized that they were walking towards her country in search of safety and protection from war and famine. While she was walking in their country in search of rescue and a safe haven from death. What a contradiction, she asked herself, puzzled and amazed. How can a country where its people sought to kill and destroy the life of an innocent girl like her provide sanctuary and protection to these harmless human creatures? This contrast led her to think about why they and she became like that. They are victims of a civil war, of racial and existential war, of ethnic cleansing, and she is the victim of an emotional, social, class, and religious war. Why should Ethiopians and Eritreans quarrel over a piece of land? An ethnic difference? And why should the rich hate the poor while Christians and Muslims disagree over religious books and a God they believe created them all? She worked for many hours. While walking, Intisar tries to find an answer to her question, but she finds nothing but a small village. It seems that the village is still inhabited because from afar smoke was seen. She quickened her steps and entered the village. When she reached the fair, she found anthropomorphic and animal creatures. They are all decrepit. Females had nothing left on their bodies to classify them as women. Each one became like hermaphrodite. Every old woman among them looks like Gakul, that ugly old hack woman who was an evil witch in the novel King Solomon's Mines by Alan Quatermain. They are all hunchbacked. Males look like demi-humans, and who each resemble the fearsome hobbit golem who appear in the movie The Lord of the Rings. Their male and female children look like the frightful creature above, except that they are 10 times smaller in shape and 50 times more terrifying than the hunchbacked golem. This time they are in very large numbers. Most of them are children. Their emaciated skeletal youngsters are not like the other children in the world. They don't play, they don't talk, they don't walk, they don't smile, and they don't laugh. They're like girls' dolls and boys' toys. Unless someone picks them up or moves them, they stick together like stones. Why are they different from other children in the world? Because they are starving and dying of malnutrition. They were born yesterday and today they die. They were born not to live but to die. Who are the killers of such innocent children? The humans say that the Eritreans are the reason of their premature deaths. And the Eritreans blame their sudden death on the Assyrians. Intisar joined them as if she had come to a place of mourning for the victims of civil and ethnic war, or the tomb of the unknown soldier who died of war in the woods. She looks at them with a merciful heart. As soon as it got dark at sunset, they fell into a deep sleep. A city girl like Intisar is not used to going to bed early. Therefore, she just kept sitting and looking at them. She wonders which of them will sleep forever. She asks herself what would she do if the angel of death killed them all at night. None of them could dig a single grave if they escaped mass destruction. They won't get the dead from them, even a mass grave. She doubted whether her physical strength could enable her to drag them all into the woods and leave them unburied. What a pity they will not receive a proper burial like those 6 distinguished ones whom she met before and buried in the manner of the forest displaced. Intisar found an old dilapidated hut, climbed into it, and decided to spend her sad night in the woods on top of it, like a monkey sleeping in a tree. She took off her boots and used them instead of a pillow. It reminded her of the first night she had fallen asleep under a large car in Khartoum City. Then people saw that she was either a teenage girl who committed adultery before marriage, became pregnant with an unlawful sexual intercourse with what haram child, and was slain in an honored killing by her father, or a homeless street prostitute. As she slept on the second night over the grave of her late sister Firdos in the cemetery of Aula Sherfi, the mob mistook her for a raging zombie and tried to stone her. On her third night, when she slept inside an old boat, the old boat owner thought she was the fairy Al-Jinniya, the beautiful bride of the Nile. He fainted from fear, and his 4 sons fled in great terror and plunged into the river water. But here, far from her accursed motherland, on her third night, in the jungle of Assyria, she did not go to sleep under a car or on the top of a grave or in a boat in the river at night in the open. Immediately, Intisar fell into a deep sleep. She fell asleep again like a log without moving or dreaming. When she woke up the next day, she felt refreshed. She put on her tall boots and tied them tightly. She is now ready for the 4th day of adventure and perilous hiking in the rugged jungle of Africa. Before she left the village, she went to check on the people she had seen sleeping at night. She wants to know who of them has died and who of them is still alive and kicking. Intisar found that some of them were gone and some were left to continue their rest. She saw those Eritrean refugees were still asleep. She approached them and examined the fairest woman. She found her dead and her sleep was gone at night. She examined an old man. She had also found him to have expired. She checked the third one, and he died too. And Cesare stopped examining them and looked at their children. All of them died during the night. She counted their He counted their numbers. There are 10 men, 15 women, and 20 children. Intisar sensed that the presence of death was very strong in that place. She believed that if she continued to stand in this place of death, she might herself breathe her last breath and depart from this life. This thought frightened her and made her flee for her life. She ran away as if the angel of death was pursuing her, or the devil was chasing her with a pitchfork in his hands. Intisar ran non-stop until she assured herself that she had arrived far from the fearful presence of death. The girl escaping from execution felt that she had become clothed at the hands of the angel of death on her fourth day in the forest of Suve, even when she was under the gallows in Freedom Square in Khartoum, while the evil policewoman Sakina's huge hands were holding and dragging her to the executioner, and when she chose between the stones of the mob and the bullets of the two soldiers at the gate of the military base in Sudan. Then she stopped running from death and sat down under a tree to rest. While resting, she began to wonder how long she would walk and how far she would have to go before she could find a final resting place. The GPS in her mind has no final destination. She felt as if she had flown on the wings of a falcon from a cursed planet called Sudan and landed on another terrifying planet known as Asubia, a land of war, famine, and death. Will she walk and walk in this empty outer space with no food, water, or homes until she turns into one of those skeletal old women walking like dead bodies? She did not find an answer to her question. She got up and continued her difficult, unsafe, and aimless journey. She walked all day until evening. She found no village or a shelter from the darkness of the night. She went to a tree and ate its dry fruits as usual, but she did not find water to drink. Her lips parched from extreme thirst, and Intisar became very tired, exhausted. She is now dragging her numb legs. In that miserable state, she managed to walk for an hour or so. She lost all her physical strength and became paralyzed. When her body ran out of gas, she fell onto the road, buried by the night in complete darkness. She cannot see anything around her. Intisar became very afraid. She thought she might get stung by a snake or a scorpion. An inch forward, she was paralyzed and her body could no longer move. As she lay lifeless, she fought 2 or 3 times against sleep, but at last sleep took hold of her mind and body, and she fell into a deep slumber like a corpse. Intisar spent her first night in the forest, unconscious and unaware of the world around her. She's as if a person has lost consciousness or an animal in hibernation in the extreme cold of the Canadian Arctic thunder. She was neither dead nor alive. She was in an indescribable ontological comatose state. In the early morning of the fifth day, the scabbed prisoner returned to life from her existential state like the emergence of a drunk woman from her stupor caused by excessive drinking of alcohol or the resurrection of a sluggish zombie girl buried tall from her grave. The stillness of the woods, the singing and chirping of birds, and the feeling of escaping a night's sleep on the way in such a frightening place made her begin her fifth day with a prayer of thanksgiving to God. When her prayer ended, she began to worry about finding water to drink. She is dying of thirst. She got to her feet and tried to walk. Intisar felt nauseous, dizzy, and about to fall. Her tired and exhausted body could not hold her anymore. She sat on the dirt ground again. Then she crawled to her knees and got out of the way and sat under the shade of a tree. After a long period of rest, she felt she could walk again. This time her walk resembles that of other emaciated Eritrean refugees she has seen crawling like a pack of tortoises through the forest. At this slow pace, the prisoner fleeing from death dragged her body for a while. Every now and then she stopped and rest. Many times she searched in the woods for water, but her search did not help her find the thing she wanted. She began to worry that she might collapse on the road and slowly die in this lonely place. Despite her crippled and dragged body, she decided to walk until she finally dies. She now walks zigzagging like a very drunk woman who can neither walk straight nor straighten her tattered body completely. She walks with a limp, her body bent just like a paralyzed young woman. As she was limping and dragging her numb legs along the secluded path in the spooky place, Intisar suddenly heard the sound of a helicopter flying over the forest trees. The sound of the helicopter warns her that she is not far from an army camp. She fears that the helicopter soldiers will mistake her for an Eritrean rebel girl, shoot her, and throw her to the ground with a dead body riddled with hundreds of bullets. The fear of being shot and killed forced her to pull her stiff legs off the road and enter into the woods to hide from the helicopter gunship. As soon as Intisar got under the tall trees in the woods, she started to hear heavy gunfire very close by. The raging gunfire reminded her of the battle raging in the Valley of the Shadow of Death in Khartoum's Freedom Square, which took place because of the change in the manner of her execution. The sound was followed by the steps of fleeing people and the screams of many revolutionaries. She became very afraid. She guessed she was caught again in the middle of a heated battle. Through the trees, she saw soldiers in uniform running in her direction. They carry their machine guns. She knows that if she does nothing, these soldiers will arrive at her place within minutes and kill her. Immediately, she climbed onto a tree and hid among its branches. From her hiding place above, she saw many soldiers running under her tree. None of them saw her. They all ran inside the jungle to hide from the helicopter. Shortly after they passed under the tree, she saw the helicopter flying overhead. She guessed the fleeing soldiers were Eritrean rebel fighters who were chased down by an assumed military helicopter. The helicopter was still shooting at the trees when it reached her. The girl, who is hiding in fear, is scared to be hit in the head by a stray bullet and falls dead. Fortunately, the helicopter flew over her head without shooting her. The sound of the helicopter gradually died down like a frightened birth, Intisar remained hidden in her watchtower for a long time. The fear of being killed took half of her fatigue away and gave some strength to her dying body. The stillness of the forest has been restored, and the birds are singing again. Despite this, Intisar clung to her branches like a frightened monkey. When she was sure that the sound of war and warriors might not be repeated again, she climbed down and landed on the ground. Then Intisar got out of the dense forest of trees and went to the road very carefully. The first scene that catches her attention is the fall of a soldier. At first, she hesitated to go to him for fear that he would still be alive and shoot her and kill her. Despite her dismay, she slowly and fearfully approached him. His face revealed to her that he was killed by the helicopter's bullets. His wounds are still open and bleeding profusely. On his back, she saw a vessel with fresh drinking water attached. She bent over him and untied the pot slowly and carefully. Immediately, she hastily filled her thirsty mouth with sweet water. After that, Intisar searched his pockets and found some dry dates, meats, and biscuits. She removed all those treasures and ate some of them in haste, filling her buckets with the rest. Then she slung the bowl of water over her shoulder. She saw a small watch on the wrist of the soldier who treasured it, and she snatched it away. It reminded her of her lover's precious gift, which her wretched condition had forced her to sail in her native land. Before she left, she decided to bury her martyr treasure soldier in a decent manner according to the custom of the displaced Eritreans in the jungle. Intisar was saddened that such a handsome Eritrean young man must die a martyr to save her life. After she drank some water and ate food, she felt refreshed and her soul finally rested in her dying body. Then she dragged out the body of the dead soldier she treasured and placed his corpse under a tree. Intisar thought he was a martyr of love, and perhaps he had a beautiful girlfriend somewhere in this foreign country. After that, she offered a short prayer for his soul and left. For someone like the runaway Sudanese girl Intisar, buckets full of dried meat, dates, and biscuits, and a small bowl full of healthy water are treasures more valuable than all of King Solomon's treasures troves. But if she knew how far she was from the Cuban military base, she wouldn't consider the heavenly manna to be of much use to her anymore. Every step she takes after that brings her closer and closer to the military base. The people in that base weren't like the harmless humanoid creatures she met every now and then in the woods. They are trained soldiers. They are forces trained to kill. They are armed soldiers, armed to the teeth. Many of them are thieves, rapists, and murderers. They hate the Eritrean rebels more than they hate Satan and his minions. They wouldn't hesitate for a second if they set their eyes on her in such a scary forest to ruthlessly beat, gang rape, and kill her. Who will persecute them for the crime they commit every day against the innocent women and girls of Eritrea? They believe that no one can hold them accountable, not even the mighty God who created them. They are like the Muslim Mujahideen who believe that God has given them absolute right over the bodies of the impure women they call their infidel enemies to rape them without having to marry them. Then they have to enslave them with their children and sell them as slaves in the slave markets. They do those atrocities on the helpless captive woman after slaughtering their infidel husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons. The runaway Christian bride Intisar had arrived hundreds of miles away from her home motherland, not knowing that it was God who snatched her neck from the gallows and released her body from the hands of the lioness, policewoman Sakina Shit Allah of the Shaitan. He also extinguished the bullet fired at her from close range by the Khartoum International Airport Security Police Inspector Al-Amin Abdi Iblis Abdel Masih Al-Dajjal. On the contrary, she saw that God had treated her cruelly and unfairly. She felt that he was repaying her for the evil she had done against her late innocent sister Firdaus, with her heavenly treasure in her pockets and on her shoulder. The runaway girl walked for a few hours and then began to hear the sound of the helicopter again. She would walk straight to the danger zone at the assumed military base if she kept walking for another half an hour. Whether one was to call it mere coincidence or a divine intervention, it didn't matter as long as her life was saved by the death eagle flying over her head. If she had continued for another 15 minutes, the Cuban sniper soldier from the watchtower would have shot and killed her a mile away. The sound of the chopper again forced her to run and hide inside the woods. She remembered how her treasure soldier had brutally been murdered and how his body was riddled with bullets. As before, the sound of the helicopter was mixed with gunfire and screams of the warriors. Intisar found another tree and climbed over it and hid like a bear fleeing from a hawk. From her hideout, Eritrean rebels could be seen running beneath her, fleeing for their lives. Another sound of a second helicopter approaching her at the first chopper passed over her tree of life. She could even see those two helicopters raining bullets down the trees. Intisar witnessed how many Eritrean rebels were shot and killed. She saw some of them running under her tree, their bodies spurting blood. There are very many. The secluded forest suddenly became noisy and busy as if it was a market in a crowded city. It is not a place for pirates and sailors, but a war zone for soldiers and rebels. The place was filled with flames, smoke, and screams. She could hear the sounds of military vehicles driving along the road. In that forest, she never expected to see a person riding a bicycle or a donkey, but now she heard many military trucks. The emaciated, harmless, humanoid creature she used to meet every now and then in the forest seemed to have eaten all their donkeys, horses, and cattle before turning into walking skeletons and dying people. Intisar began to hear loud voices of people chanting victory or defeat, but she did not know who the victors were and who were the losers. And the foreign Christian hiding girl prayed to God for her murdered body and the departed soul after seconds, not for her safety. She felt closer to death than the time Sakina, the fat elephant, dragged her to the gallows by force, who was a man disguised as a tough policewoman. She also closed her eyes because she expected that she would be closer to her final departure from the land of the living and descending into the world of the dead than when she was in the Freedom Square in Khartoum, which was like a Roman amphitheater full of titans, gladiators from the security beastly forces and human monsters of Muslims believers. men, women, and children. Battle of lions and tigers against gladiators armed with white weapons. She expected that at any moment the torrential stream of bullets might hit her body and send her dead to the ground. The deadly battle lasted for 2 hours above and below, but not a single bullet fell on her body from the torrential rain caused by the heavy gunfire of the two helicopters. She felt as if someone had placed an invisible iron canopy over her head and shielded her from the torrential rain of the bullets. She concludes that the same mighty angels who protected her on the battlefield in Sudan have once again descended from heaven and are saving her life now in the jungle of Asuba. So she offered a prayer of thanksgiving to her Creator again. Although the battle was over after sunset, the frightened girl spent her fifth night in the land of Abyssinia, clinging to her tree of life. In the early morning of the sixth day, Intisar heard many military trucks coming towards her hiding place. She guessed that the Cuban soldiers most likely came to survey the battlefield. Therefore, she quickly descended from her tree of life and fled into the forest and ran as fast as her feet could take her. She flies like a frightened little sparrow, fleeing at the speed of light from the deadly falcon hawk chasing her at the speed of sound. Chapter 93. The arrest of the suspected terrorist Muslim girl. The Christian bride Intisar, who fled from her motherland of Sudan as a result of the issuance of the obedience sentence against her and the death penalty of her apostasy from Islam, embracing Christianity and supposed adultery with her Christian groom Sami, continued her escape in the jungles of Asuba for many hours. When she learned she was far and safe from Asuban soldiers and Eritrean rebels, she sat under a tree to rest. Then she opened the heavenly treasure of hearts which she had taken from the unknown soldier and ate and drank of it. She looked at her new stolen watch. Assuming local time is 2:15 p.m. Intisar understood that she ran for about 7 hours. After eating her first meal of the day and knowing how much time she has spent running, she decided to take a short nap. Then she woke up. Then she can wake up and continue on foot on an unknown and perilous journey in a foreign land. As soon as she let her exhausted body to rest and close her eyes, she fell into a deep sleep and seemed to snore loudly. She is like a little girl who slept on the floor of her house after eating her food, waiting for her loving mother to come and carry her in her arms and take her to her bed. She is weary from the terrifying night she spent atop the tree of knowledge of good and evil for the innocent Eritrean rebels and evil Asuban soldiers. She slept for many hours. Most likely, she may continue to sleep until midday the next day. Her sleep was interrupted by a heavy boot kicking her back, and Tisar woke up with a sleepy goosebumps. When she looked up, she found herself surrounded by many angry and frightened faces of Abyssinian soldiers. At first, she thinks she has been visited by some demonic creatures or is having one of her terrifying nightmares in her tomb-like cell in Khartoum. Their faces are covered in mud and blood. Their teeth are yellow and their eyes are red. They look like cannibals among the African jungle savages who gather around her to devour her fresh raw meat. Once she saw that their guns were aimed at her head, the foreign girl escaping from prison, Intisar realized that she was not free and safe in the forest anymore. Unfortunately, on the seventh day of her temporary freedom, the escaped Christian bride was finally caught. The fugitive Sudanese prisoner has been held for nearly 2 months in prison in her home country. Then she escaped from the gallows by a rare miracle and walked all the way nearly 1,000 miles from her native country until she reached a foreign country, walking day and night and hiding in the woods among the bushes and trees. In the end, she fell into the hands of a Cuban soldier who are even more ruthless than the heartless female police interrogators and Muslim terrorists in the women's prison in Khartoum. Intisar perilous march to freedom is more painful and full of hardships than that of Withold Gliniski, who walked 4,000 miles to freedom all the way from a maximum security prison camp in Siberia, Russia to India. Withold Gliniski fled across the Gobi Desert and across the Himalayas to freedom in Hindustan. He trekked through forests and forests and through mountains and desert in a journey that took 11 months. Likewise, the Christian bride fleeing from prison in Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir miraculously escaped from the girls in Sudan and walked thousands of miles in the valley of the shadow of death, the dangerous African jungle. Ultimately, she falls victim to the hands of the Cuban soldiers who are more dangerous than her Sudanese rapists, hardened policewomen, interrogators, and Muslim terrorists. The so-called Nusayba sisters. What a pity! The Sudanese fugitive was captured by the Cuban army. The Cubans considered her to be a rebellious Eritrean girl. Then they brought her to their military base camp in Eritrean province and kept her as a prisoner of war. They planned to extract some information from her and get rid of her. This is how they deal with Eritrean prisoners. They will not be allowed to live more than a day or two from the time they are captured. As Cuban soldiers do not follow nor believe in the Geneva Convention on rules of war and the treatment of prisoners of war. On the contrary, they believe that the Eritrean rebels are not combatant soldiers, but dangerous Muslim terrorists like the Mujahideen of ISIS, Boko Haram, Janjaweed, Hamas, Hezbollah, Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, and Taliban fighters. The Geneva Convention states that a combatant is a person who takes a direct part in the hostility of an armed conflict. If a combatant follows the law of war, he is considered a privileged combatant and, upon capture, becomes a prisoner of war under the said Geneva Convention. An undistinguished combatant is a person such as a mercenary who takes a direct part in hostilities, but upon capture is not eligible for prison of war status. A Cuban soldier took advantage of the current debate is whether the rules of Geneva Convention of War apply to Islamic terrorists, especially since terrorism does not have a universally agreed upon definition. The Geneva Conventions 1949 and additional protocols 1977 form the basis of international humanitarian law in times of war. The treaty focuses on the treatment of hostile forces as well as civilians living in occupied territory. The captive Sudanese girl Intisar was brought to the military base and thrown into a small dark room, which is no less terrifying than the endless hall in the terrifying Sudanese prison in which she was held before being transferred to Kobar Central Prison for Women. In her new detention, the Sudanese captive found that there were some Eritrean boys and girls in captivity. The captive boys are more than the captive girls. Her fear increased when she made the unpleasant discovery that for the first time in her life, she as a female had become imprisoned with males. Fortunately, they were all tied with ropes to, to, to logs, thick wooden balls. If they were not restrained, the male captives would surely gang rape at night every female captive who was locked with them in the same room without light. Each female detainee will be gang raped by at least 5 to 7 boys. Intisar saw all of their faces disfigured as a result of severe beatings and their bodies stained with blood, mud, and slime. Some of them are half naked and some are half dead. Some of them were seriously injured and passed out, and some of them died anyway. In her new dangerous military detention, the foreign captive Intisar spent her seventh night in the soil of Ethiopia, sleeping alongside male and female Eritrean rebel detainees. Some of these captives kept talking to each other in a strange language to which it was all Greek for her. Early the next morning, she was taken in for questioning. Soldiers interrogating her beat her and tortured her when she could not speak to them in Eritrean Tikringe language or their Ethiopian Amharic language. When they beat her with sticks and whips, she kept crying and begging for mercy in her mother tongue. None of them speaks, speaks Arabic. The detective soldiers finally come to the unavoidable truth that the captive girl they are torturing is a foreigner from another country. However, they cannot know her country of origin and the foreign language she speaks. One of them is smart enough to know how to solve the problem of communication with their alien captive girl. Although he can read and write English, he still cannot speak it. So the shrewd soldier brought a pen and paper and wrote in plain English language, what language do you speak and from which foreign country did you come to our country Ethiopia? With a trembling hand, the foreign captive wrote, I'm a Sudanese girl. I recently came to Ethiopian land and my mother tongue is Arabic. The second question, which naturally followed, how did you come to Ethiopia? And how did you happen to be hiding in the jungle among those damn Eritrean Muslim terrorists? Intisar desperately tried to distance herself from the Eritrean rebels and their cause, which she did not know and might not care if she did. But her explanation was rejected by her executioners. Then the Cuban soldiers tried to nail her with a crime so serious that it is considered even more serious than the crime of the Eritrean rebel for which she was captured. At first, they have decided to view her as a dangerous mercenary or a hired professional soldier who fights for any country or a nation without regard to political interests or issues, but for monetary gain. Some of them went so far as to accuse her of being a Muslim Arab terrorist or a foreign jihadist female fighter who joined the rebel Eritreans because they are Muslims to fight their infidel enemies, the Ethiopian Christians. The foreign captive Intisar cried and begged them for mercy on her bent knees and wrote to them that I am a peaceful Christian girl and not a Muslim terrorist. Then the interrogating Cuban soldiers brought 4 of their female soldiers and ordered them to verify or refute her claim by examining her genitals to see if she had been subjected to female genital mutilation as a child, as is done to every Eritrean Muslim girl or was she uncircumcised like the Ethiopian Christian girl? Accordingly, she was stripped of her outer clothing, the shirt and pants, and had a small black swimsuit-like underwear. And the human Christian soldiers examined her private parts, and unfortunately, the result was positive. The ugly scars on her hairy pussy spoke loud and clear that she was a circumcised Muslim girl with mutilated genitals from an early age. Then she tried to convince them that she was indeed born and raised as a Sudanese Muslim girl, but had recently converted to Christianity while living with a Coptic Christian family in the city of Khartoum. Her torturers rejected her allegations, but decided to refer her case to their headquarters at the General Command of the Cuban Army in Addis Ababa city. They understood that the condition of the foreign captive girl Intisar is somehow different from that of other Eritrean female prisoners of war. After that harsh interrogation of the foreign captive over the hands of the Ethiopian soldiers, both male and female, through severe beatings and erosion, by examining and exposing her circumcised private parts, her body, which had been severely beaten with whips and sticks, was returned and thrown again into the new dark abyss. Also, after their harsh interrogation and extraction of important confidential information from their bleeding mouths, many of the Eritrean captive boys and girls who were being held with Intisar were killed by live bullets fired at close range in their heads in front of our eyes. Their corpses were then bullied out of the death camp room like slaughtered animals. Fortunately, she is the only captive whose life was spared, as the ruthless Cuban soldiers still question her true identity. They cannot prove or disprove that she is an Eritrean Muslim terrorist or a traitorous Cuban spy girl. Shortly thereafter, the foreign captive Intisar was transferred to another Cuban military prison and was treated better than when she was in the dark trench where she was held with the rebel Eritrean freedom martyrs. She now receives 3 regular meals a day and is allowed to shower and use the public restroom for a human female soldier. Her captors gave her some clothes to wear and took her dirty clothes and sent them to a caterer to be washed and ironed. 2 weeks later, a group of some high-ranking Cuban soldiers, senior officers, came from Addis Ababa with an Arabic interpreter. The Arabic translator happens to be a Sudanese refugee living in a refugee camp in the capital of Ethiopia. Fortunately, he hates Sudan more than he hates Satan. Before he himself became a rebel in the Darfur region of Western Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces, who were known at the time as the Muslim Janjaweed militias, killed his parents, massacred his 3 brothers, and raped his 2 minor sisters. When the imprisoned Sudanese girl Intisar recounted her tragedy while crying how she was tortured, raped, falsely accused, and sentenced to death, the compassionate Arabic interpreter shed hot tears as well. The story of her torture, persecution, and rape is more brutal than what happened to his 2 sisters. He concluded that she had suffered torture, persecuted, imprisoned, tried, mistreated, and raped much more brutally than the Janjaweed soldiers had done to his 2 underage sisters. Accordingly, the Sudanese refugee translator sided with the Sudanese captive girl Intisar and convinced the senior Cuban army officers that she was truthful in what she said had happened to her in her motherland, and that it was exactly what she claimed she was. Moreover, he told them she had no dog in the fight between Asuban soldier and Eritrean rebels. Although the senior Asuban army officer understood and were convinced that the Sudanese captive girl they held had no personal interest in their fight with the Eritreans, they did not release her. Now the prisoner Intisar is being held on charge of smuggling herself illegally across the Sudanese border into Ethiopian territory. After that, her felony case was referred to the Ethiopian Central Intelligence Department in Asmara, the capital of Eritrea, before being transferred by helicopter from the military base in the Eritrean province to Asmara women's prison. Intisar was treated kindly by the Asuman soldier. She was treated for her many wounds by a military medical team, besides being allowed to eat 3 good meals a day, take a shower, and use the women's restroom. She was also given a kind of freedom. She can now leave her locked room at will and wander around the courtyard of the military base. She has been strictly warned not to attempt to escape or exit the base. She was told that she might be shot and dead by soldiers, snipers, bullets if she tried to escape. In a short time, Intisar became good friends with the kind Sudanese translator. He informed her that his name was Mr. Yasir Ahmed Abdelaziz, and she told him that her name was Mrs. Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir. He also said that he is married to an Ethiopian Christian woman known as Ababa Tisfai, and they have 6 children, 4 daughters and 2 sons. She also informed him that she is a new Christian bride and that her Sudanese groom is called Sami Osman Al Taib, but they do not have children yet. She told him with tears that she had aborted her first fetus, which she bore from her Christian husband Sami as a result of the severe beating and brutal rape that her alleged Muslim husband Hassan had exposed them to, whom she slaughtered in defense of her honor on the third night of her bloody fight with him, which lasted 3 days and 3 nights, in the obedience house room when she was still in remand in the notorious Kobol Central prison for women. Mr. Abdulaziz told Mrs. Intisar that he, his Ethiopian wife, and their 6 children will soon be sent by the UN office for resettlement in a Western country, but the office representative did not specify which country. This last piece of information reminded the Christian wife Intisar of her failed foreign trip with her Christian husband Sami to resettle them as Eritrean refugees in Canada. However, she decided not to share such a secret problem about her tragic life in Sudan with her new acquaintance in Ethiopia. Although he was a Muslim and knew that she had left Islam and became an apostate and infidel Christian girl, the Sudanese translator did not hate her and did not try to stir up an unnecessary, malicious religious problem for her with the Cuban soldiers who were from Christian backgrounds. Finally, Mr. Abdulaziz confessed to Mrs. Intisar that he found some Christian in Addis Ababa to be 100 times better than the Janjaweed Muslims of Darfur who killed his parents and 3 brothers and brutally raped his 2 underage sisters. As a good example, he pointed to his beloved Christian wife, Abba Tisfai, and her loving Cuban parents and siblings, who were all Orthodox Christians. He also mentioned that most of the UN staff in Addis Ababa are Western Christians from Europe and treat him with love even though they knew he's a Muslim man. Chapter 94. A Cuban prisoner, Maria Braha. The helicopter that transported the detained Sudanese girl Intisar arrived in the city of Asmara on the same evening. They moved her to another military base From there, the Sudanese prisoners was transferred by military vehicle to the women's prison in the capital of Eritrea. The Christian bride who miraculously escaped execution in Khartoum in Sudan found herself again in the women's prison in the city of Asmara in Ethiopia. Now she is once again trapped in a detention center amid prostitutes from brothels and illegal bar girls, drug addicts, thieves, homeless, and dangerous female killers, Eritreans and Ethiopians. There are many accused prostitutes who have been arrested for roaming and selling their bodies for cheap prostitution in the deserted streets of Asmara, or having bad sex in car seats with citizen travelers and foreigners who picked them up from public roads and wanted to devour them as easy sexual prey. All of them are Ethiopian, Eritrean, Somali, and Kenyan Christian and Muslim suspects and convicts. Intisar spent her first day in Asmara in the overcrowded women's prison. She discovered that some of the detainees could speak English, but most of them only spoke the local languages of Eritrea and Ethiopia, Tigrinya and Amhara. In addition, she found that the imprisonment of women in Ethiopia is 1,000 times better than the infernal detention of women in Sudan. Detainees are provided with 3 regular meals each day. The prison dormitories are spacious, clean, and not filled with suspected and convicted women like the barracks for women held in Sudanese prisons. In the dorm where Intisar lives, there are mattresses and blankets for every detainee. Moreover, it is not as crowded as that dark, bottomless abyss in the Democratic Republic of Satan. In addition, the detainee in the prison in Asmara is treated as a human being and not as a slave or an animal, as was the case in her miserable condition in women's prison in Sudan. The next day, the accused Intisar was placed into handcuffs and taken for interrogation, expecting to fall again into the hands of some ruthless Ethiopian police woman like the evil Sudanese soul interrogators who tortured her and left her half dead in the fire and brimstone of women's prison in Kobar Central prison in her homeland. As soon as she entered the interrogation room, she found that there were 2 women and a man. They are all in civilian clothes. The man said smiling, "Welcome to our country, Ethiopia, Miss Sudan." The Sudanese suspect said with a frown on her face, "Thank you, dear sir. Why did you come to our country? I've come to your country to seek asylum and protection from this. Why didn't you come through one of our international airports? Why did you smuggle yourself across the Sudanese-Ethiopian border? I tried to flee through Khartoum International Airport, but I was unjustly arrested and sentenced to death by hanging for the crime of apostasy from Islam. I read the report of those Ethiopian army officers who interrogated you, but I don't believe that Sudanese law will sentence a Muslim girl who changed her religion from Islam to Christianity to death by hanging in a public square. Many people in Ethiopia have converted their religious affiliation from Islam to Christianity and vice versa, and no one has arrested them or tried to kill them. We have people here in our country who call themselves communists and follow no religion at all, and some atheists who also don't believe in God. Every citizen here is free to worship whatever he wants. Even if he wants to worship Satan, he can do so, and no one has the right to persecute him or kill him, even if that person is a member of his family, such as his father, mother, or a brother. said Sudan is an Islamic country governed by Sharia laws, not a secular country like Ethiopia. Islamic law prescribes the death penalty for every Muslim man or woman who abandons Islam and converts to Christianity. There are authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad that stipulate the execution of any Muslim who turns away from Islam and converts to another religion. For example, but not limited to the Prophet Muhammad commanded his Muslim followers in one of his authentic hadiths, saying to them, whoever changes his religion, kill him. Miss Intisar, my knowledge of the laws of Islamic Sharia is zero. I do not wish to know anything about the teachings of that Arab religion, which has become a source of terror in all parts of the world, including in this secular country of ours. Agree with you, sir, in everything you said about Islam teaching on terror and reducing terrorists and misogynists, and also on non-Muslims whom the Quran called impure infidels and permitted killing them, enslaving their women and children, and raping their free women as captives of war, of jihad, in the way of Allah. I would like to add that I am clear of any misdemeanor that I have been accused of committing in your great secular country Ethiopia, which gives women and men equal rights and treats all people equally, regardless of their race, religion, gender, or skin color. As I assure you, my brethren in Christ, that I have not committed any felony or a mortal crime in my country, Sudan, that deserves to be condemned to execution by hanging to death, by stoning with stone, or by cutting off my head with a sword. However, as I said in my confessions at the military base of the Assyrian soldiers, I fell in love with a boy before marriage, and I did not commit adultery with him, and even married him in a sacred Christian matrimonial union in the church in Khartoum city through the priest, and after I changed my religion from Islam to Christianity. Falling in love and changing religion are not punishable offenses here. In my country, Sudan, apostasy from Islam is a crime punishable by law and leads to death by hanging, stoning, or beheading with a sword. Well, we don't want to get involved in your ridiculous religious strife in your damning Muslim country. What is important to us is that you illegally smuggle yourself into our country. For this crime, we have to deport you to your country, Sudan. Dear sir, you must know that every day dozens of poor Africans and displaced Arab Muslims smuggle themselves out of North Africa in human smugglers' boats across the Mediterranean Sea to western shores. And when they reach Europe and are caught by the Coast Guard, they will not be treated as criminals, but as victims of civil wars, famines, political, religious, and ethnic persecutions. Then they are given the status of refugees, and secular European countries like yours take care of them. So please, sir, treat me like a Sudanese refugee fleeing religious persecution and class discrimination between rich and poor. Do what you want to do to me, except send me back to my country of origin. Even if you had to imprison me for 10 years for smuggling myself illegally into your country, that is more likely tolerable than sending me back to be executed. As I said, I have come to seek asylum and protection in your secular country. If you send me back to Sudan, I'll be hanged for the crimes of apostasy and adultery. As she spoke these heartbreaking final words, the Sudanese girl on the run from death, raw, wept and begged for mercy. Miss Intisar, we have a law in this country, and according to our law, you are an offender. You have to appear before an investigative judge in a criminal court. You can hire a lawyer to defend your religious case. Say, I am a strange girl in your country. I don't have the money to hire a lawyer. The felony court will appoint an attorney without having to pay for your defense. Suppose my lawyer fails to convince the judge of my religious problem, you will still have the opportunity to appeal in your case. And if the appeal I will file it is also denied, I regret to tell you that I do not have the right to decide on behalf of the court. If the judge decides to return you to your country, the Cuban police authority will deport you by plane to your home country and hand you over to the Sudanese authority. Intisar responded to these disturbing closing words by shedding copious tears. While crying with bitterness and deep sadness, she fell to her knees and raised her handcuffed hands and said words that about her persecution and suffering and what awaits her in her homeland. Her belief breaks hearts and moves the whole world. After feeling that he had heard enough from the Sudanese girl who smuggled herself to his secular country, the man said, "Please, policewoman, take her back to the woman's prison." Immediately, two huge Cuban female guards dragged the Sudanese suspect Intisar as if she were a dangerous criminal. Shortly thereafter, the Asmara woman's prison, the administration set an appointment for the accused Sudanese foreign girl who smuggled herself illegally across the border into the country to appear before an Cuban investigative judge a month later. Anyway, during her first week in the prison, the suspected Sudanese girl developed a close friendship with a detained Cuban girl named Maria Abraha. She is a very beautiful, compassionate girl, full of love that she shows to all the inmates. Her love, kindness, and unparalleled beauty remind Intisar of her favorite song, Maria, for the wonderful Sudanese singer Hamad Raya. It is the only song that she memorized by heart, and she always sang it with her beloved Sami before she fell prey to her tragedies, suffering, and persecution in Sudan. So Intisar sang it in prison to her new Cuban friend who is in prison with her in the same dorm in the woman's prison. The beautiful Sudanese captive girl Intisar fell in love with her charming Cuban friend in Asmara, Maria Abraha, as well as her sweet Coptic friend in Khartoum, Suzanne. As Suzanne was to her like an oasis in the desert of Sudan, Maria became to her like a pool of fresh water in the jungle of Subia. So the song goes like this, which Intisar sang it to her beloved friend Maria. Oh Maria, I wish I hold the castle of Phidias and a genius soul, and in front of me is a mound of marble to carve out the reckless sedition in the same measure as you, an enlarged statue, and made hair like a waterfall, some on your shoulders and some scattered, and on the cilia inexplicable night, and on the cheeks light breaks, and on the teeth sugar, and a mouth like a hungry lion snore. He sends a whisper to his fragrant melody, and he calls out thirsty lips, and another regrets. And on the chest, fountains of hell exploded, and a bell in a thread. The shorter I say it is, the waist was smaller. Oh Maria, if only I had a chasel of Phidias and a genius soul, I created you, O Maria. O my goddesses, my goodness is in my hand. O Maria, I wish I was at the top of the Olympics sitting, and about me the brides. I am at the peak of inspiration between inspirations. Drink the pure wine of Bokshas. So if the apostasy goes in me, I fall back and call out, hey girls, they pluck it the guitar gently. And here are the songs for Maria. Oh Maria, what 20 has become in the price fluctuate. She wears a celibacy dress. Secretly she desires, and with our chest Borobotoyas screwed into the rock torture in the body of a thousand fairs and the body of a thousand scorpions. You, Helen, oh, who crossed the sea of my veins thousand compounds. Oh, eyes like springs, serenity and softness, and lips like a cluster's fullness and sweetness, and cheeks like my dreams light and beauty, and a strong figure, bright swagger, and blood filled all the arteries cravings. O girl, you are light morning and evening gypsy. O Maria, I am from Africa. It is a great desert and the equator. It charged me with the heat of the sun, and it distorted me like an offspring. Oh, the fire of the Magi, it scorched me, and from it like an ebony tree. I am a sulfur mine inflammable. Everything I smell is amazing at a distance. Come here, O Maria. I'm from Africa, hungry like a little baby. I fall for a red apple who brings her closer, becomes guilty. Come on, say goodbye to the foolish gods and get angry, and tell them they did not respect the desire of a human soul. What kind of a paradise without love? Like a barren desert, O Maria, and tomorrow you will blow into my cells. Parting praise. I am getting distant like Aloysius in the depths of burning. We may not meet again, O Maria. Exalted be sign your name with fire here in my lips. And say goodbye, Maria. The Abyssinian Maria is loving, charming, and beautiful, and she is also a highly educated girl. She holds a master's degree in languages from prestigious faculty at the University of Asmara. So she is multicultural and speaks four languages fluently: Amharic, Tikrinje, English, and Arabic. She can read and write in all of these languages. Despite her wonderful beauty and high education, she has a tragic story that is much sadder than the love story of Intisar and Sami. She has been in love with a handsome Asuban boy for many years. What a pity, one day her beautiful Abyssinian boyfriend met with a fatal traffic accident and died instantly. Maria lost hope in life and became addicted to alcohol and drugs. She lost her job, her family, her friends, and everything. This eventually led her to prostitution. This is why she was arrested several times as a street prostitute and thrown behind bars. She became a jailbird. Intisar tells her friend Maria, that she is still young, beautiful, and educated. She can still find another lover who might be like her late boyfriend. Then the Sudanese girl said to her Asuban friend, why do you punish yourself and destroy your life without a mistake that you or your late friend did? not commit. Maria told Intisar that the Cuban community would never accept her back again. They will always look at her as a degenerated street whore and bitch. Intisar said to Maria, "You can change your city, Asmara, and go to another city. There you can start again and live a good life. Also, since you are a highly educated girl who can speak many foreign languages, you can apply to immigrate to Canada or Australia. You can also work as an interpreter at the United Nations office in Addis Ababa." Maria accepted Intisar's advice and told her with joy that no one before you had given me such a good advice since I lost my late lover. Perhaps God sent me to your country and to this prison for you. Yes, you are right, Intisar. You are like an angel who came into my life to open my eyes and change my destiny forever. As a result, the Abyssinian street prostitute who frequents prisons completely changes her thinking. Then she promised her foreign jail inmate that she would never sell her body again and would never touch alcohol or drugs. Similarly, the Sudanese prisoner told the Cuban prisoner about her tragedy. Maria felt sorry for the persecution, torture, and injustice that Intisar was subjected to in Sudan and Cuba, and appreciated her courage, struggle, and patience amidst all the evils that happened to her. Then she encouraged her not to lose hope in life. Why don't you call the United Nations office in Addis Ababa and tell them about your emotional, social, and religious problems? Maria asked her Sudanese friend. How can I contact them while I am in prison? And Tessa responded to her Cuban friend. This is not a problem at all. I can do that for you. I will be released from prison after 1 week. Then I will go to the UN office and apply for asylum for you in Ethiopia. But how can I prove to them that I am the same Eritrean girl who was granted refugee status in Sudan? This is not your task. This is their duty towards innocent persecuted people fleeing from their countries and hiding in other foreign countries. They can write or phone you at the prison in Asmara or send a fax to their office in Khartoum and check your application for refugee status here or there. After a week, the beautiful Abyssinian girl Maria Abraha left the prison in the city of Asmara and headed to the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, to live a new life free from drinking alcohol, drug abuse, and cheap street prostitution. The two girlfriends, fellow prisoners, separated from each other with many tears. The days after Maria's departure were dull for Intisar. 10 days later, the detained Sudanese girl lost hope with the promise of her Cuban inmate who was released. She thought maybe the UN office didn't believe her friend, or she forgot to keep her promise. Moreover, Intisar believed that Maria had returned to her old life of addiction to alcohol, drugs, and street prostitution. The 10 days have become 20 days. And Intisar knows that there are only 3 days left until her trial. She became sad, gloomy, and lonely in jail. She felt that she had been blessed under a curse by her late sister Firdos. She also thought she was cursed at time of birth. She concluded that God hated her for her sins and transgressions and condemned her forever. Wherever she goes, she met with hatred, enmity, rejection, and condemnation. She struggled and fought many battles to achieve her life's dream of being a wife and a husband with her lover Sami. All her life she dreamed of having children with him and raising them together. She has walked many miles on foot and seen many evils. She walked through the jungle of the valley of the shadow of death in Africa alone until fate made her fall into prison again. Even here in this foreign secular country, thousands of miles away from her mother country, she was condemned by Christian people who did not know her. She feels that she was cursed before she was born, and that bad luck always haunts her. The Sudanese captive bride has now dried up from any beauty or perfume. When she was in the city of Gadarif, the third innocent girl in Tisar, Ferris felt that few people had conspired against her and her lover. But later, when she went to jail in Khartoum, she blamed her entire Muslim community. Now that she is inside the women's prison in the city of Asmara, she views the entire human race as her enemy. She wishes death to get her out of such whirlwind of this never-ending suffering. As usual, Intisar believes that God will compensate her for the evils she did to her younger sister, the second innocent girl, Firdoz. She again invade her late sister for the reason of her short suffering and quick death. As for her, she was judged by God to live long and suffer more. Her unhappy life and bitter tragedy became even worse than the legendary story of the wandering Jew, who was also called the Eternal Jew. The tale of the Eternal Jew is not a true story, but a legend created due to the growing anti-Semitism of Jews among the Christians of Europe. To this day, many Arab Christians, as well as Muslims in the Middle East and North Africa, believe in the same fictional anti-Semitic myth. An American Christian bishop visited Europe and falsely claimed that he saw the wandering Jew, and the false story moved with him to the United States of America. It became like the protocols of the learned elders of then. It is yet another anti-Semitic apocryphal text that purports to reveal an insidious Jewish plot of the learned elders of then to take over the world. The wandering Jew was known as Ahasuerus. It is a medieval legend about a Jew who refused to give Jesus Christ water on or wouldn't let him lean against his wall while the Lord carried his cross on his way to Golgotha. As punishment for his unforgivable sin, God condemned this Jew to perpetual wandering, pain, and torment until Christ's second return to earth. Everyone wishes to live a long life, but a long, happy life. But this wandering Jew was doomed to a long life of perpetual suffering and constant, restless, and endless wandering. The apostate Muslim wife who became a Christian bride fleeing from execution. Intisar also believed that God had cursed her and condemned her to live a long life of perpetual suffering and constant restless wandering. She concluded that her apostasy from the religion of Islam and her conversion to Christianity were just ones that brought the eternal curses of Allah and His Prophet Muhammad upon her. She wished she had not escaped that day from her gaolers and the thousands of her stoners. If she had been hanged or stoned, she would have ended everything and gained eternal life, either in bliss of the Garden of Eden or the fire of hell that will never be quenched, and it is fuel humans and stones. She tried to commit suicide in the Nile River, but even death refused her. She has no way of escaping her endless suffering. On that day, the Sudanese prisoner was informed that she would be transferred tomorrow morning to the Central Women's Prison in the Ethiopian capital. Nothing more than that she was told. She concluded that her trial would be held in Addis Ababa rather than Asmara. Intisar left the prison the next day with a sad and gloomy face. She laments her ordeal the entire way. She did not even look at the faces of the two assumed female guards who guarded her during the trip. They arrived in Addis Ababa in the evening. She was taken directly to the main women's prison. That night, Intisar couldn't sleep, and she stayed all night crying and lamenting her bad fate in life. She expected that she would not be able, through her lawyer, to prevent the Ethiopian criminal court from deporting her to Sudan. She also understood that the Sudanese police authority would demand her extradition. At 10:30 the next morning, the foreign captive girl who escaped from the death penalty in Sudan and smuggled herself illegally across the border into Ethiopia was taken out of prison and transferred by her female guards to the office of the Deputy Commissioner of Police in Addis Ababa. When Intisar entered the office, she found a beautiful white woman, a good-looking Ethiopian young lady, and a man who she was told was the Deputy Commissioner of Police. The white woman's pretty face caught Intisar's attention, and that careful face showed eagerness, longing, and willingness to talk to her. The human woman is also young, beautiful, and gentle. Then the beautiful white woman got to her feet and extended her hands to Intisar and greeted her warmly in English and shook her hand. While she was saluting and holding in both hands, Intisar's right hand, she started to speak. "My name is Victoria Thomas," said the white lady. "I'm a Swedish woman. This beautiful girl's name is Gloria Seifu. She's Ethiopian. We have come from the United Nations office in Addis Ababa. We have received your asylum application and carefully examined your case and found it valid. That is why we approved your application and granted you asylum in Ethiopia." "Thank you very much, kind ma'am," Intisar replied immediately with tears of joy. "You should also thank this honorable deputy police commissioner and his Ethiopian government for accepting you as a Sudanese refugee in their country. Thank you very much, kind sir. And also do not forget to thank God and your friend Maria Abraham, who brought your case to our attention and filed it out with the asylum application form on your behalf. I will definitely do that, ma'am. You are now as free as this great man, this beautiful young woman, and me. Thank you very much, ma'am, and thank you very much, sir, and thank you, Miss Gloria. I have never felt such overwhelming happiness and such feelings of joy in my life as I do today. You virtuous people are not human beings, but angels of God." Gloria said, "Yes, God always uses his people who are ready to follow him." "Amen," the Deputy Commissioner of Police said. "We all say Amen," Victoria said. The Deputy Commissioner of Police said that beauty queen, only happy smiles can free her from the great joy that filled her heart, mind, and soul. She now walks with her head held high and confidently behind the two United Nations staff members in the hotel room in Addis Ababa, where she was booked. Then they informed her that within a week she would be flying from Addis Ababa International Airport to the Heathrow International Airport, and her final destination would be Toronto International Airport in Canada. Their generosity reminded the Christian bride Intisar of her Coptic friend Suzanne and her good family. During her terrifying and dark days in the infernal Sudanese prison of Fuman, the unjustly detained Christian bride almost forgot every person she knew in her life. She knew that she is an innocent girl who was unjustly imprisoned and sentenced to death for crimes she did not commit. Her evil police, female guards, and terrorist Muslim prison flying over the flowers and roses. She wants to grow her wings and fly to the blue sky and land in front of her soulmate Sami, and they will live together happily ever after in their promised paradise, the land that flows with milk, honey, money, happiness, and eternal love.